Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: IU Health Southern Indiana physicians, primary care and specialty care providers, now accepting new patients in Bloomington and throughout South Central Indiana. siphysicians.org. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching and learning in Indiana and around the world. More at education.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Could lawmakers vote to loosen Indiana's alcohol restrictions?
It's probably time for it to happen, even if I'm not personally thrilled with having to work on Sundays.
Could they propose legislation that would allow Sunday sales or more places to sell cold beer? Indiana made it easier this year to establish syringe exchanges. Counties no longer have to get state approval. But there are fewer exchanges now than before the law went into effect. Coming up, a legislator who has been one of the leading voices for policies to fight the opioid epidemic joins us from the statehouse. Plus, even if you're not a huge Star Trek fan, you probably recognize these.
This was not something that I imagined myself holding on to forever because I thought it was important.
Coming up, the story behind the ears and how you can see them. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. An increasing number of lawmakers and leaders in the alcohol industry are getting behind the idea of changing the state's alcohol laws. The two main issues are Sunday sales and cold beer sales. A legislative commission tasked with studying the state's alcohol rules is beginning to prepare its recommendations for the General Assembly. And as Barbara Brosier reports, the big challenge is how to draft legislation that doesn't favor one type of store over the other.
The owner of Hoosier Buddy Liquors is in a unique position.
We're the only liquor store in Nashville.
But his biggest competition sits right next door.
Our biggest competitor, on price especially.
While CVS may be able to sell its beer, wine, and liquor with minimal markup, Davis has a different advantage. The alcohol he sells is already cold.
Sunday sales might be an inconvenience, but cold sales in those other stores would very nearly kill a lot of the independent liquor stores in Indiana.
Indiana only allows liquor stores to sell cold beer, but it's one of many laws a special alcohol code revision commission is considering changing. Members are tasked with examining several aspects of the state's alcohol laws, including the prohibition on Sunday sales and issues with obtaining alcohol permits. The commission met for the 5th time this week, and former Indiana excise police officer Terry Bauer outlined his proposal for changing some of the decades-old rules. He wants to allow liquor, grocery, and convenience stores, as well as pharmacies, to sell alcohol on Sundays, but keep cold beer confined to liquor stores.
All permit holders, by my suggestions, will have new opportunities for sales and the playing field will be considerably leveled.
Under Bauer's proposal, the stores could sell alcohol from noon to 7 p.m. on Sundays, but pharmacies would have to put all alcoholic beverages in an area that's separate from other products. They would also have to provide a separate checkout station for alcohol. And he wants all clerks that ring up alcohol to be at least 21 years old and have a liquor permit. Bauer says the changes would result in new revenue for each type of store, but some question that claim.
I just don't know that it is the proper role of the legislature to choose to protect one segment of the industry and not provide the same kind of protection to someone else, or not allow the same benefit to someone else in the business.
And others still argue some of the expansions could be harmful to Hoosiers.
I'm not opposed to some of what we're talking about, even the Sunday sales issue and that. But the more we make this a commodity like any other, the more we're going to create more social problems.
Davis wants state legislators to consider other changes to Indiana's alcohol laws that could help level the playing field between liquor stores and their competitors. He wants them to consider lifting restrictions on who can come into the stores and what they can sell.
Lift the law that states you have to be 21 to come in here, because I think it's quite hypocritical that a child can't come in here, but they can do whatever they want in a Kroger or Walmart surrounded by the exact same products.
It's a lot for the commission to consider before drafting its final recommendations for lawmakers by the end of the year.
There's certainly some high-profile issues out there: Sunday sales, cold beer, how products are displayed, auctioning permits, a number of issues. I would not want to speculate on how the commission will decide to approach each one of those.
Davis says liquor stores, including his own, will survive if a Sunday sales bill makes its way to the governor's desk. It's what could come after that, changes to selling cold beer, that worries him.
I might be able to survive it, but my business model and my approach would definitely have to change, and it would definitely not help.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
The committee is not only supposed to come up with recommendations for the legislature, but also drafts of legislation, and that's all due the first week of December. The committee is scheduled to meet at least 2 more times before then. Now, for headlines, we go over to Barbara Brozier, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. The Columbus Police Department says flyers distributed by a white supremacist organization called the Midwestern Alliance started showing up at bus stops this week. Lieutenant Matt Harris says the flyers aren't in line with the city's values.
Columbus has people from all over the world that come here to live and work. We're a very diverse city, so to see this type of material at our bus stops or posted on a light pole in town is troubling and frankly it's disappointing.
Harris says the city's police department alerted other law enforcement agencies about the posters and will continue to monitor the situation. Indiana has the best business tax climate in the Midwest and 9th best overall in the nation, according to a Tax Foundation report. Indiana Business Research Center Director Jerry Conover says Indiana legislators have been very deliberate in creating the state's tax climate.
It's a delicate balancing act to find the right level of taxes where enough people will be living and working here to keep the state going with revenue, while at the same time not so high that it scares away people who decide they're going to live somewhere else.
He says Indiana's tax climate has spurred growth in new industries like information technologies, and he says affordable corporate tax rates and low cost of living for employees makes the Hoosier state attractive. A fund to cover lunch debt at the Monroe County Community School Corporation will likely come up short. The district is contributing $20,000 to the fund, which is made up of community donations. The money is used to cover any lunch debt on accounts that owe more than $10. MCCSC says about $30,000 more is needed to cover lunch debt through the end of the school year. Researchers are developing and testing a program to predict crime and other social harms, including traffic crashes, drug abuse, and medical emergencies. The Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis researchers are building algorithms that pick up on patterns like a large number of assaults occurring in areas with lots of bars.
And then hopefully take algorithms that find those patterns and tell police and other community members when and where to be to prevent these sorts of events.
Designers collaborated with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department and Emergency Medical Services. Researchers are preparing for a trial run of the software in 2019. Republican Representative Jackie Walorski is asking the State Department of Health to reject an abortion provider's application to open a clinic in South Bend. In recent years, Indiana has passed laws making it more difficult for clinics to perform abortions. The nearest abortion providers to South Bend are currently in Maryville and Kalamazoo, Michigan. Activists came out to protest a conference in Indianapolis about the dangers of pornography. As Tyler Lake reports, differing schools of thought on feminism clashed over the conference's agenda.
The conference speakers were mostly feminist scholars and experts, sexual abuse advocates, and students. Cassandra Avenatti stood outside the conference holding a sign criticizing the coalition for not including sex workers in the discussion.
And so if you're trying to help or support a population while silencing them, that's not actually helping.
Avenatti says that she takes issue with what she calls the rescue narrative of the conference. She says that pornography is not the sole cause of misogyny. In a statement, the coalition calls pornography a controversial topic, but affirms its commitment to take a stand against issues that are difficult and sometimes unpleasant to discuss.
Pornography absolutely exacerbates sexual violence. Our kids at younger and younger ages are watching pornography at horrific rates, and they are taking on these behaviors.
The coalition says it makes sure all of its events and trainings are research-based. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Tyler Lake.
The Utilities District of Western Indiana plans to announce its new CEO soon. The board is choosing from 3 finalists. It fired former CEO Brian Sparks in June. The new CEO has a lot of work to do, restoring confidence among ratepayers. During Sparks' tenure, rates soared to the highest in the state and among the highest in the Midwest. The FBI is also investigating the electric utility. Indiana is seeing an 82% cut in federal funding for the state's Navigator program, which helps people enroll in health care coverage through the Affordable Care Act. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, Indiana is seeing the steepest cuts in the nation, going from $1.6 million to about $300,000.
People are really nervous, anxious, worried, and now there's even less help for them to get their questions answered.
Stone says with federally funded navigators being cut significantly, Hoosiers may have to start paying out of pocket to get help enrolling in health coverage. The enrollment period to get health care for 2018 opens early next month. People will have 45 days to shop for insurance. In the past, they had twice that much time. An environmental study committee examining the issue of water in the state wrapped up its meeting this week, but did not produce any recommendations for the legislature. The panel's final hearing focused on problems related to access and affordability of drinking water, especially in southern Indiana. The Indiana Finance Authority is studying water availability in the state. It will have a final report out in December. The creative team behind The Good Catholic is shooting another film in Bloomington. Production started today. Indiana-based Pegasus Pictures plans to make 6 films in Indiana over the next 3 years, beginning with a dark comedy called Ms. White Light. Zachary Spicer, who was the lead actor in The Good Catholic, will co-produce and act in the film. Spicer says, while the film industry is concentrated in big cities like New York and Los Angeles, Indiana has its own appeal.
I think it's important to have a voice and to have a new storytelling entity, not in New York and not in LA, but actually in the middle of the country, and start getting new conversations going and changing the conversations that we're currently having.
The latest film follows a woman capable of removing fear from terminally ill patients and includes elements of the supernatural. Eileen Collins has traveled to space 4 times since the mid-90s. She was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame and included on the Encyclopedia Britannica's list of 300 women who challenged the world. Now she's taking her message of ambition and tenacity to college students and beyond.
But it's also for young people that are listening, that are in high school, middle school, and even prior to middle school, because I was in 4th grade when I decided I wanted to be an astronaut, that you can set high goals for yourself. Don't give up, because I guarantee you it's going to get hard.
Collins' appearance in Indiana is part of the Diversity Speaker Series at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. And Joe, they have 2 other speakers planned for the rest of the school year.
What a great message.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Barbara. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. With President Trump declaring the opioid crisis a national emergency, more attention than ever is being paid to the drug crisis. We'll talk to a state senator about Indiana efforts to fight the epidemic. And you won't believe your ears when you hear about a recent donation to the Lilly Library. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
10,000.
15? 15, you think?
20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18.5.
24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000.
650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it. It's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 140 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose. President Trump declared a public health emergency yesterday to deal with the opioid epidemic. The announcement frees up some resources for treatment. Now, Indiana's governor applauded the decision, saying it multiplies the impact of the state's efforts and save more Hoosier lives. Joining us now is State Senator Jim Merritt. He's been a leading advocate for solutions to the opioid epidemic here in Indiana. Welcome, Senator. First, your reaction to Trump's announcement briefly. Is there any substance there, or is it just politics?
Oh, I think there's a lot of substance there, and I'm very pleased that he made the announcement yesterday. I thought it was a powerful speech, and I think it's going to be catalytic for us in Indiana. Many good parts of that speech, including the IMD part, where you can have more than 15 beds in a facility. I think that the Christie report that's coming out, the interim report was great on the Christie Commission on drugs, and I expect the report that's going to be the final report is going to be exceptional in itself, and a lot of answers lie in that report.
Indiana, made it easier this year to establish needle exchanges. Counties don't have to get that state approval, but there are fewer exchanges now than before the law went into effect. Is there a need for any state action now?
I think needle exchanges should be a local decision. We've seen some, like you said, some communities, some counties back away from it. Maybe they see the issue lessening in their area, in their county. But something like Monroe, Scott County should continue if they feel as though the scourge of heroin is so impactful in their community that they believe that possibly HIV or Hep C will be in the situation, in the crisis that they're experiencing. But I'm quite comfortable right now that this is a local decision, local funding, and local government officials making that impact.
County officials say that they have a moral obligation to not enact some of these needle exchanges, but at the same time, as you said, the exchanges have been seen to help the spread of HIV. So how do you tackle that issue with moral obligations on that county level?
Well, I can't really talk about the moral issue. That is in their community. That's in their heart, and I support their ability to make that decision. What I do support is someone in that community that may see Hep C or HIV start to pop up, and clean needles are the demand of the day when that occurs, and just like in Scott County. Obviously, the folks of Monroe County believe that a needle exchange is important. They work with the prosecutor, they work with the community leaders and funding, and got the job done, and that is good for that county itself.
All right, thank you very much, State Senator Jim Merritt.
Thank you.
Education advocates say they're worried special education in public schools could be threatened under U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos. DeVos is a known school choice proponent of state voucher programs, which use public funds for private school tuition. As Lindsay Wright reports, the Indiana Coalition for Public Education of Monroe County hosted a panel this week to discuss the issue.
School choice proponents say vouchers offer low-income students a different and sometimes better education opportunity. But members of this panel disagree and are spreading awareness to other public school supporters.
I think the message was be ready for the next attack on public education.
A bill proposed during the 2017 legislative session looked to expand vouchers to special education families. But Kathy Fuentes-Rower says taking money from public schools hurts communities as a whole, including special education students.
I'm a mother of 4 children. There's nothing more important to me than my children's lives. But we have to recognize that in a society, we need to be about all children.
More than 34,000 students used vouchers in the 2017 academic year. Katharina Cox, a special education teacher, says she feels too often teachers are missing from conversations on these complex issues.
People forget about the teacher perspective. They may talk about the teachers, they may scorn the teachers, they may praise the teachers. However, I think it's important to understand what value the teacher can bring to the educational process.
Cox and other panel members encouraged attendees to get educated on the challenges public schools and special education teachers are up against. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lindsay Wright.
Another rural Indiana school will close its doors by the end of the year due to budget problems. As Taylor Haggerty reports, the closure of Steinsville Elementary School is part of one district's plan to improve its current facilities.
Community members came out to the Richland Bean Blossom School Board meeting earlier this week. Some brought handmade signs and posters asking board members to delay the vote and to think of the kids. Parents, teachers, and students spoke out during the meeting's 30-minute public comment period. Some expressed concerns about the elementary school closure causing overcrowding at the district's other schools. But most of the commentary focused on the loss of a community. Board members pointed to low enrollment as a major factor for the school's closure. Steinsville Elementary School currently has 150 students enrolled. In addition to closing the school, the board approved a 6-year construction project costing $50 million. Board President Jimmy Durnall was the only opposing vote.
Just give them a chance to try to find solutions that they can bring to us and give them more time, basically.
Community members expressed frustration with the lack of notice about the proposal to close the school. But Durnall says the discussion, which involves dealing with a budget deficit, isn't new.
Officially, it got underway in April of this year when a long-range planning committee was formed to discuss the needs of all the buildings and what we'd have to do to increase the enrollment.
But some parents say the board didn't consider any options that could help both Steinsville and the other local schools.
They made it to where they had to decide between one school and another, one group of parents and children or another. There was no option where they could do both.
Owens says she and other community members will continue seeking other solutions. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Taylor Haggerty.
And this next story will certainly cause the ears of all Trekkies to perk up. A recent donation to the Indiana University Lilly Library brings Hoosiers closer than ever to the final frontier. As Becca Costello reports, a piece of Star Trek history highlights Indiana's connection to the iconic science fiction show.
The archival library at IU's Bloomington campus has long had a Star Trek collection. When Ben Motes found out about it, he knew he wanted to make a donation. A pair of latex Spock ears he got as a gift for his 6th grade graduation.
I treasured it in a way that, a Star Trek fan and a kid who's in reverence of this thing would have.
Leonard Nimoy played the pointy-eared Vulcan Spock on the original series and in several films. This pair of ears was part of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country.
If we return to space dock, the assassins will surely find a way to dispose of their incriminating footwear, and we will never see the captain or Dr. McCoy alive again.
This was not something that I imagined myself holding on to forever because I thought it was important. That really was like, this thing that I thought, would ultimately end up in a collection somewhere, it could be right here.
Library staff hope the Spock ears will bring in more people eager to dig into the dozens of boxes in the Star Trek collection.
This is the original prospectus from the Star Trek series. You can see it's dated March 11th, 1964. So this is sort of the pitch for the show, which simply put is A Wagon Train to the Stars.
The collection includes scripts from every episode of the original series and The Next Generation. Jerry Taylor, an IU alum who co-created the Star Trek Voyager series, donated a lot of it. Voyager captain Catherine Janeway is even from Bloomington.
I've always preferred farm country myself.
Bloomington, Indiana. Your hometown. You've mentioned it on several occasions.
Bauman says the values of IU and the Lilly Library are mirrored in Star Trek.
The show really encourages curiosity and exploration, and that is what we want to do as well. One of the Vulcan sayings is infinite diversity and infinite combination, and I feel like that could be a pretty good motto for the Lilly Library, because we have such rich diversity of collections and stories that they have to tell.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Becca Costello.
And that's the end of this program, but we have more at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: IU Health Southern Indiana physicians, primary care and specialty care providers, now accepting new patients in Bloomington and throughout South Central Indiana. siphysicians.org. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching and learning in Indiana and around the world. More at education.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. And by WTIU members, thank you.